Macy'sBackstage.com.
Geico presents eyewitness interviews with inanimate objects.
This is Belinda Collins, live on the scene of a recent hailstorm.
Nah, bro. I was in survival mode.
Your football can't help you in a hailstorm. Geico Insurance Agency can help you get covered for personal property damage. Call Geico to see how affordable homeowners insurance can be.
What does building a better bank look like? It starts with building Capital One cafes. Warm and...
At the end of each of my specials, I've always stood before you and given you my views on the topic at hand. I'm going to do that now, but in a slightly different way. Impeachment is such a combustible issue with political, legal, and historical dimensions that I thought it best to ask the basic questions we all wonder about and then listen to what some of our experts had to say. It's important to understand that impeachment is a political process. An impeachable offense is, at the end of the day, whatever Congress defines as such. But we live in a constitutional republic shaped by law and history. So what can we say about the mandate given to Congress under which it can impeach a president? In other words, what are high crimes and misdemeanors?
High crimes and misdemeanors, which is the phrase used in the Constitution, has a very concrete, specific meaning. High means pertaining to high office. So if your crime or misdemeanor has nothing to do with your office, you're not really covered by the framers' idea of impeachment.
If you look carefully at the reasoning of Republicans and Democrats who have voted for impeachment over the course of our history, you'll notice that they always come back to the idea that some action or some pattern of conduct by the chief executive represents a threat to our democracy and to our Constitution.
One of the questions we must all wonder about is, why is it that we hear so much talk about impeachment these days? Bush, Obama, and now Trump. When did this all start?
It really has been about 20 years from the Clinton impeachment. That impeachment talk has so overtaken our political discourse. President Trump came to office with about 1/3 of the American public already supporting his impeachment. That's extraordinary.
And that gets us to the elephant in the room. Has Donald Trump committed offenses that could be considered impeachable?
Like money laundering, which some suspect in his real estate deals, or fraud involving Trump University, or tax evasion, which is why some theorize he won't show us his tax returns.
Crimes that Trump may allegedly have committed before he had anything to do with the office of the presidency do not count as high crimes and misdemeanors, and they would not be impeachable offenses in my view.
What about the issue of obstruction of justice?
Obstruction of justice is a charge that was used both against Richard Nixon and against Bill Clinton. And if it's real, it's a very strong ground for impeachment.
Oh, and there's James. Harvard law professor Noah Feldman says that when the president fired James Comey, he may have committed obstruction of justice.
My own view is that he could have done so if he did it with corrupt intent. It's true that the director of the FBI works for the president, and the president has the right to remove him on any whim that he might have. But the fact that the president can remove Comey doesn't mean that it's permissible for him to do it if he did it for gain.
To prove that, you'd need a smoking gun.
It's very hard to prove corrupt intent.
Feldman does see possible charges in another case. Michael Cohen's sworn testimony that the president directed him to make an illegal payment to Stormy Daniels. Cohen says it was made to influence the election.
A president who distorts the electoral process and breaks the law in doing so is someone who is potentially impeachable.
The president thinks it's a witch hunt. And what about special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation?
If there were evidence that Donald Trump further colluded with Russians in a way that undercut the legitimacy of the election, that would be an even deeper parallel to the Richard Nixon case.
Necessary to see the constitutional process through to its conclusion.
Of course, we don't yet know what Mueller may have found in his investigation. But there was one area where I was surprised to find considerable agreement among our experts. All spoke with wariness about wielding the sword of impeachment.
Impeachment is capital punishment for a presidency. It's something that Congress should not consider
unless all other avenues are no longer open.
And what would an impeachment process look like in the deeply divided America that we live in today?
A lot of folks think that impeachment just falls out of the sky like some kind of sword of Damocles. And I'm here to tell you that it doesn't. Congress has to decide whether impeachment is the right move.
Unless there is overwhelming proof that the majority of the country accepts, impeachment will not bring this country together.
It creates a crisis of domestic governance. It activates the worst kinds of partisan tribalism on all sides of the aisle.
The only circumstances where I would actively support impeachment would be where there was evidence so glaring that failure to impeach would essentially show the hypocrisy of the whole system.
In other words, America might be too polarized today to be able to deal with an impeachment honestly and responsibly. That's a dark verdict on the state of our politics, but it rings true, and it has a worrying consequence.
When you live in a world of broken politics, and when you live in a world of extraordinary partisan polarization, it just may not be possible to generate the consensus necessary to use the impeachment power. That's a scary thought. There may be circumstances where we just can't wait for the next election. And I don't have a reassuring answer to that.
Throughout this special report, I have tried not to tell you what to think about this explosive issue, but to give you the facts and context to help you think. I hope I've succeeded. And that is our program tonight. I'm Fareed Zakaria. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, quiet, listen up. Everybody up front, here. Team, we're really down to the wire, okay? Looking like some weekend work is necessary. Hey, where's everybody going?
Risks are greater than raises. The all-new fun-to-drive Toyota Corolla hatchback with enhanced handling. Tap the banner or go to toyota.com/Corolla hatchback for details.
Imagining a better bank starts with looking at the savings rates most banks offer and saying, really? Capital One is building something better. You can open a Capital One savings account with one of the nation's best savings rates. From anywhere. Like here. Or here. Or here! One of the nation's best savings rates. Opened online, at a Capital One location, or from anywhere. That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet?
For consumers only. Offered by Capital One NA, member FDIC. Copyright 2018 Capital One.
Stop into Lowe's for everything you need to get your home organized for the new year. Right now, you can save on storage solutions for the whole home with up to 25% off select storage and organization products. If you're looking to maximize your space, save big with the Edsel 5-tier steel freestanding shelving unit, now only $69.98. It's versatile enough to be used in the garage or the kitchen. All projects have a starting point. Start with Lowe's. Offers valid through 1/9/2019 while supplies last. U.S. only.
NFL fans, go to NFLshop.com today and check out all the hottest brand new officially licensed Nike apparel and New Era team headwear. Looking for just the right gift? NFL Shop is the perfect place to find a gift for yourself or others. Choose from the largest assortment for all 32 teams anywhere. You don't get no better than that, baby. NFLshop.com is your source for the best selection of NFL products. Go to NFLshop.com.
The news breaks, details start pouring in.
Okay, we do have major breaking news this morning, a jaw-dropping exclusive.
The networks are going live on the scene. How will you keep up? TuneIn Premium now exclusively brings you live MSNBC, CNBC, and Fox News Talk commercial-free, so you can hear breaking news from the left, right, and center without the breaks. Try TuneIn Premium for 7 days, free, and never miss the action as it happens. Hear it now, hear it live on TuneIn.
Well, if you're like me, you spend too much time looking for a playlist and not enough actually listening to the music you love. TuneIn does the work for you. With over 120 music stations, you can just push play and start grooving. Hot music, no work, and you can listen on TuneIn today.
Planning for your future? Wouldn't you like to have a personal guide through the confusing jungle of Wall Street investing? Then we've got a show for you. Mad Money on CNBC every weekday at 6 p.m. Jim Cramer draws you a no BS map for navigating opportunities and traps with one goal in mind: making money. Get inside the head of one of Wall Street's most successful money managers and start improving your portfolio. Listen weekdays at 6 p.m. Eastern. Just search for CNBC or Mad Money on your TuneIn app.
Hear every play from every game live with the NFL on TuneIn Premium. Regular season action concludes today at 1 Eastern with a full schedule of Week 17 games. With playoff implications across the league, listen live as the Lions take on the Packers in an NFC North showdown in Green Bay. Or catch the action in New England as the Patriots host the Jets. In New Orleans, the Panthers and Saints square off at 1. The final matchup is between the Colts and Titans in Tennessee at 8:20 p.m. Eastern. The excitement of the NFL is on TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Get your daily dose of talk with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Start the day off with stuff you should know.
Yeah, I guess this would be the twist edition of Stuff You Should Know.
Or dive deep into the world of politics and pop culture with The Ben Shapiro Show.
The reason that this is a controversial issue is because nothing in the Constitution...
From the Bill Simmons Podcast and the Ringer Podcast Network to TED Radio Hour on NPR. Catch your favorite podcasts right here on TuneIn. Just search in the podcast section today and discover a podcast today.
Hey, I'm Kelly Sutton, and I want to invite you to add a little twang to your tinsel.
Hey, this is Luke Brown, wishing you a Merry Christmas.
Classic Christmas songs and new additions to your holiday soundtrack, performed by country music favorites like Faith Hill, Kenny Chesney, Lady Antebellum, George Strait, and so many more.
Hi, this is Brad Paisley, wishing you a Merry Christmas.
Search Country Christmas on TuneIn and celebrate Christmas the Nashville way.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining me. I'm Martin Savage in for Frederica Whitfield. A good Sunday to you. In 2 days, we will all ring in the new year. With it, a whole set of old issues, as the federal government likely remains partially shut down heading into 2019. The president says he will not sign a deal that doesn't include funding for border security. The Democrats in the White House can't agree on what that actually looks like. Is it a wall like the president campaigned on, or is it something else? Arnetta Bash raised that point with White House counselor Kellyanne Conway this morning.
The government failed to pass Kate's law. They failed to pass a wall. No. It has been shut down. No. That is incorrect. That is the president said it in the Oval Office. He said very shut down because of border security. Is it border security? That we don't have a drug crisis at our border. Is it the border? It's anything. It's all of the above.
And this morning, President Trump's outgoing chief of staff, John Kelly, telling the LA Times, quote, "It's not a wall." This, as both sides remain locked in a stalemate. The president standing firm that he wants more than the $1.3 billion offered by Democratic leaders. So let's try to find some clarity. For that, we turn to CNN's Sarah Westwood. She's at the White House. And Sarah, the president, of course, is at the White House today, once again tweeting about the shutdown and continuing to place the blame solely on Democrats.
That's right, Martin. President Trump is keeping up the pressure. He's been slamming Democrats for leaving town during the shutdown that he created and holding out for funding for his promised border wall along the southern border, although it's not exactly clear whether that remains a wall. The president, we've heard him refer to it as some kind of structure involving steel slats, and outgoing Chief of Staff John Kelly is now saying that this administration abandoned the idea of an actual wall early in Trump's presidency. He told the Los Angeles Times, to be honest, it's not a wall. The president still says wall oftentimes. Frankly, he'll say barrier or fencing. Now he's tended towards steel slats. But we left a solid concrete wall early on in the administration. Now, Trump has also told aides that he would not be willing to sign a bill that funded a border fence at just $1.3 billion, which is not surprising because that is the deal the Democrats put on the table before the shutdown began. But nonetheless, incoming acting chief of staff / budget director Mick Mulvaney has hinted that the president might be willing to back down off that demand for $5 billion worth of border wall funding, although there's not a lot of clarity yet about exactly how much the president would be willing to come down. And although we haven't seen the president for the past few days, he's been active on Twitter this morning touting efforts to get Coast Guard personnel paid during the shutdown, writing great work by my administration over the holiday to save Coast Guard pay during the Schumer shutdown. No thanks to the Democrats who left town and are not concerned about the safety and security of Americans. Now, keep in mind that Mulvaney has said that the Democratic congressional leaders actually have not been invited back to the White House for further negotiations. But Trump had asked his staff to find a solution to this particular problem, the Coast Guard pay, created by the shutdown. But thousands of federal workers are still waiting to see when they might get paid next. There's no end in sight for this shutdown, Martin, as Democrats prepare to retake the House and shake up negotiating positions in just a few days now.
All right, Sarah Westwood, thanks very much for that. With me now are congressional reporters Karun Demirjian with the Washington Post and Eric Wasson with Bloomberg. As we have already pointed out, there is this ongoing debate on Capitol Hill. Is it a border wall or is it border security that's the sticking point here? Eric, what's going on here? Why can't the House and Democrats seem to get on the same page, at least when it comes to language?
Well, I think we're seeing with John Kelly and Conway this shift on the White House's part towards border security. They're trying to say this is not a wall. They're trying to come and meet the Democrats halfway. Now, the Senate Democrats already agreed this summer to $1.6 billion for new fencing. Now, if you could just tweak that design, the White House came to Schumer and talked about $2.1 billion in their secret offer the Saturday before the shutdown. They're really only $500 million apart out of a $1.2 trillion budget. I think they could be very close. However, Nancy Pelosi is not yet Speaker. She will be on Thursday. Perhaps then the talks can get serious.
Yeah, but Karun, if it seems like perhaps financially we may be getting closer, the language is still very different. And I'm wondering, is it important? The distinction between what some call a wall and others call border security. Does it really matter, or is it one and the same?
It just depends on who the listener is. I don't think that the GOP on Capitol Hill really likes all of this drumming on about the wall and only the wall, because they, for a long time, have been talking about a mixed border security solution. You can't physically have a wall run the entire border of the U.S. and Mexico. It does not work topographically or with land rights or with the rivers that are there, too. And the GOP's known that for a very long time on Capitol Hill. They don't like this singular focus on the wall, but parts of Trump's base really do. And the president's talking to parts of the base that some of his advisors who speak on the Sunday shows are not talking to. And so you have this mixed bag of terms, and depending on who the president's talking to, he will now mix it up too. We've heard him say fencing. We've heard him say border solutions in the last few days and weeks as well. And so there's this kind of this soup out there. You can pick what you want to listen to because all those options are on the table. That does still, though, make the negotiations across the aisle with the incoming House Democratic leaders quite complicated and confusing, because they're not sure quite what they're negotiating with. Is the president at the end of the day going to go back to this wall, or is he going to be open and amenable to something that's a little bit more of a mixed bag? And when you don't know what you're getting, and you're not even, and all you're getting is this kind of unclear demand for something border related with nothing in exchange that was maybe on the table before, you don't know quite how much money to give or what sort of a deal to make. It's true that this is not about that many dollars at this point in the macro scale of how big the federal budget is, but it is about staking your negotiating positions that you're going to have to be pursuing for the next 2 years, and about the fact that we're not just talking about numbers when it's talking about the border. That's border security, it's immigration, it's all kinds of things that the parties have been at each other's throats over for well over a decade.
Well, Eric, let me play this soundbite that we've got from Senator Lindsey Graham earlier, and he said that Trump's not signing anything without wall funding. Here, listen.
The one thing I know for sure that nothing will get out of the Senate without wall/border funding, and Democrats are not going to give us any money for wall border security without getting something themselves.
Are we just getting too tied up in the word wall? And is wall really shorthand for extreme revamping of border security and perhaps renovation of immigration laws? It's a whole big package.
I think Lindsey Graham is tending towards that in the semantic game right there. He's sort of from a wall/border security. They're dancing around these topics. But to Karun's point, Democrats tell me that they cannot do a deal with Trump unless he publicly supports a new offer of a lower amount of money, of border security. If he publicly endorses that, then they feel maybe he's really serious about making a deal. But with the DACA talks last year, Trump talked about $25 billion for a wall in exchange for protections for undocumented young immigrants, and then backed away from that. He talked about signing the February 8th stopgap measure to prevent this shutdown, and then he backed away from that under pressure from right-wing pundits. So Democrats just feel like they do not have the trust necessary to seal this deal. If there was some trust, perhaps they can bridge this difference.
Do you think that it's possible that somehow the House and Senate could come up with a deal and the president still won't sign it, Kurt?
Definitely. I mean, look, at this point, the question really is, what is Mitch McConnell going to do? If the House Democrats decide to put out a clean budget extension, because that already passed the Senate once, ostensibly it could get past the Senate, unless the Senate feels like the president's not going to have their back and they don't want to be hung out to dry a second time. If the House decides to go back and try to open up this this extension of the budget and try to include some other things, whether it has to do with immigration or with the Mueller investigation, there's been all kinds of proposals tossed around the last few days. That could send negotiations back to square one. But theoretically, you could have a situation where the House says, look, we're just going to repeat what we know already passed the Senate, clean budget extension, send it to the Senate, have them do the same thing, send it to the president. He could still veto. And in that case, they don't have veto-proof majorities. So this is all coming down to not just trust between Nancy Pelosi and President Trump, which, as Eric said, is at a minimum, but also, do the Republicans trust each other, and do they trust the president to be able to have their back when they take a step? It's not a three-way game now, because it's not the House and the Senate and the president, but it still is going to take some meeting of the minds that right now has not happened.
Karun Demirjian and Eric Watson, thanks very much for joining us this morning. I'm sure it's not going to be the last time we talk about the wall. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's important to remember that those who are caught up in the middle of this political fight are real people whose lives are impacted every day as this shutdown continues to drag on. And that includes people who depend on government assistance for food to try to feed their young children. So now I want to bring in Joel Berg. He's CEO of Hunger Free America, a nonprofit group that works to make sure that everyone has access to nutritious food. Joel, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for discussing this vital topic.
So let's get this out in the open. We've talked about, of course, government workers that may not be getting paid, or some who are working but no salary. But what are the impacts for people who are on the lower rung of the income and need this kind of government assistance? How are they cut off, or is it near to them being cut off? How critical?
Great question, Martin, and it's important to preface this by saying that government employees are not mutually exclusive from the population of low-income people. The lowest paid federal employees make $25,000 a year, and they could miss a paycheck on January 11th. But in terms of the big nutrition assistance programs in America, the WIC program, which provides 7 million pregnant women and children with nutrition assistance in a vital time, the SNAP program, the newer name for the food stamps program, which provides 39 million Americans nutritional assistance, most of whom are working, those could go away in a few weeks if this shutdown is not solved. So low-income people haven't been pushed off the cliff yet, but they are at the edge of the cliff, and it's very dangerous if this is not resolved very, very soon.
And what happens if we do reach this point? Because it does appear this could be drawn out for some time. And what will they do, or how will people be fed and cared for?
So first you will see WIC clinics closing. Not to get too deep into the wonkish weeds, but WIC is one of the few nutrition assistance programs that's not an entitlement, that is dependent on annual funding. In the 2013 shutdown, they were shut down for 13 days, and you saw in Utah, for instance, there was a lot of confusion. They closed down WIC clinics for a few days and then close them back up right before this is settled. So you could see nutrition assistance to pregnant women and infants shut down sometime over the next few weeks. This is a program that's prevented 500,000 babies from dying at birth, because when you get better nutrition as a pregnant woman, you're far less likely to lose the baby at birth. So it's just astonishing to me that a side that claims to be pro-life is even dangling the possibility of taking away food from pregnant women and infants. And in the worst case scenario, And a month from now, food stamp SNAP goes away, and 39 million Americans can't go to grocery stores. Not only will there be a huge wave of serious extended hunger in America, you will see a near collapse of smaller and mid-sized grocery stores and bodegas and corner stores in America. So I hate to be apocalyptic about this, but sometimes the sky really could be falling. And as you know from your coverage of Katrina past in your career, you know when there's a big disaster, it's low-income people who suffer the most. And in this shutdown, once again, it's low-income people who stand to suffer the most.
So if this government shutdown, I mean, how many weeks are we talking about? What is the deadline you see as when these programs really fall into a cataclysmic result?
I think between 3 to 4 weeks is probably the most likely time the money would actually run out. I also didn't mention, a lot of people don't understand their local food banks, and thus their local soup kitchens and food pantries that get help from their local food banks do get subsidized by the government. Not only do they get government food, but they get government support to transport the food from where the donations are to where they serve it. And that could be problematic in a few weeks as well. So it's really a matter of weeks, and we'll see how far this goes. But right now, nonprofits are suffering just because groups like mine don't have certainty. Other groups that have government contracts don't have certainty. Those nonprofits that are working for the government don't know whether they're going to get paid back. They don't know what they're going to do for employees on their payroll. And for small nonprofits around the country, uncertainty is a huge problem. There's a thing called the Community Development Block Grant Program, which funds things like Meals on Wheels. And as long as people don't know when that funding is going to be restored, it's really difficult for grassroots nonprofits to survive and to plan properly and to serve people properly, make sure shut-in senior citizens are getting these meals they need.
Right.
So everyone lauds the nonprofit sector, except when push comes to shove, they're really putting the nonprofit sector in grave danger.
Yeah, and the longer this goes on, the greater that danger will continue to be. Joel Berg, thank you for explaining something I think a lot of people weren't aware of. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Martin.
Still ahead, President Trump facing new pressure from lawmakers following his decision to pull troops out of Syria. Senator Lindsey Graham says the fight against ISIS is far from over, and it's about time the president understands that. More on his message to the president coming up next.
Oh, they just go up so fast. He's 3 already. Little man, have you thought about tutors? Colleges, our PhD program. You have to start sometime.
Safe is greater than shelter. The all-new Toyota Corolla hatchback. Toyota's Safety Sense 2.0 comes standard, so you can enjoy the present without worrying about the future. Drivers are always responsible for their own safe driving. See owner's manual for additional limitations and details. Tap the banner or go to toyota.com/Corolla hatchback for details.
Macy's Backstage has everything to help you get a fresh start, including active gear from brands you love, Reebok, Fila, K-Swiss, and more. Hurry in and find the best booties of the season, starting at $19.99. And pamper yourself. Bring the spa home with fragrant candles, aroma diffusers, even salt lamps, starting at just $5.99. Best of all, look for incredible markdowns in every department all month long. Macy's Backstage, off price, on trend, arriving daily. Find your store at macysbackstage.com.
I'm Jay Farner, CEO of Quicken Loans, America's premier home purchase lender. We've created a new way to protect you from unpredictable interest rates. Our exclusive Rate Shield approval. First, we lock your interest rate for up to 90 days. Then, if rates go up, your rate stays locked. But if rates go down, your rate drops. Either way, you win. Call us today at 800-QUICKEN or go to rocketmortgage.com.
Rate Shield approval only valid on certain 30-year fixed rate loans. Call for cost information and conditions. Equal housing lender. Licensed in all 50 states. NMLS number 3030. Additional conditions or exclusions may apply.
You think of the Home Depot for bedroom or bathroom updates, but bed linens or bath towels? Now you can find premium names like Laura Ashley, Eddie Bauer, and the Company Store at HomeDepot.com. It's a new year. Start with fresh new towels and bed linens from HomeDepot.com. Right now, up to 30% off with any order over $45 delivered free. The Home Depot. More saving, more doing. U.S. only valid through February 3rd. Enter promo code BEDBATH15 at purchase for an extra 15% off.
Macy's After Christmas sale has all the stuff Santa missed. Get an extra 20 or 15% off with your Macy's card or pass. Treat yourself to 25 to 45% off fine jewelry. Dresses that almost never go on sale are 25% off. And get an extra 30% off men's basics when you spend $50. Now through January 1st at Macy's. Savings off sale prices, exclusions apply. Macy's Star Rewards now offers perks everyone can love no matter how they pay. Sign up for free in-store or at Macy's.com/Star Rewards.
I'm a real person, real voice, and a real face. Even though you can't see it because, radio invisibility. You know what else is super duper real? Geico local offices. A Geico local agent could tailor fit a policy to you, which can save you hundreds on your car insurance. All because Geico local agents keep it real, with real savings, real service, really.
And if you're looking for more ways to save, a local Geico agent can help with your homeowners, condo, and renter's insurance too. Stop by or give them a call today.
At some point today, Senator Lindsey Graham says he plans to meet with President Trump. It's a last-ditch effort to try to get the president to change his mind about withdrawing U.S. troops from Syria. Graham says that he's planning to sit down with the president in the hopes of getting him to reconsider that decision. Earlier on CNN's State of the Union, South Carolina Republican told Dana Bash that if the U.S. pulls out of Syria now, it could pave the way for an ISIS comeback, put U.S. allies such as Kurds at serious risk, and then open the door to other U.S. adversaries who wield power in the region. Listen.
The war against ISIS, they're still not defeated in Syria. I'm asking the president to make sure that we have troops there to protect us. Don't outsource our national security to some foreign power. If we leave now, the Kurds will get in a fight with Turkey. They could get slaughtered. Who would help you in the future? And if we leave now, there'll be a land bridge from Tehran to Beirut.
Joining me now is retired Army Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. General, good to see you.
Good to see you, Martin.
So the pullout of troops, we've heard a lot about this, and then you've just heard the senator reference that it could lead to the slaughter of the Kurds, who are currently America's main partner on the ground. Many Americans may not be familiar with the relationship between the U.S. and the Kurdish government and those Kurdish fighters. So are they really at risk, and what are the dangers they face if this decision goes forward?
Yeah, they most certainly are. Martin, having worked with the Kurds in 2007 and 2008 during my time in Iraq, it is a unique government with a lot of unique cultural dynamics. They have certainly been fighting not only in Iraq, but in Syria, as we know. There are some who will say that elements of their organization are terrorists. There are no indicators of that. But the people who are saying that usually are ascribed to the government of Turkey. And they have been fighting against the Syrian regime for the past several years, as well as some of the terrorist organizations in northern Syria. So yeah, it seems to be that there are a lot of enemies of the Kurdish people in that part of the region. And certainly the Turks are not very welcoming to the Kurdish habitat in their southern borders in the northern part of Syria.
Right. I believe there's been an ongoing conflict between both that country and the Kurds.
Right.
Which may explain why we saw, I think it was this week, the Kurds asking for protection from the Assad regime in Syria, which we do not consider an ally of the U.S. So why would a U.S. ally like the Kurds ask the Syrian regime to come to its defense?
Well, primarily because they know the Turks have vowed vengeance against them. So they're asking for anyone to support them. And in fact, this is part of what is occurring in terms of the leaving of a vacuum in this part of the world, in this part of the Middle East. When they look across the border and they know that the Turks want to literally eliminate them as a culture, as a race on their southern boundary, they have said this many times, not only in this region, but in the region in northern Iraq. The Turks do not want the Kurds to have a homogeneous region. So they have said this. And indicators are that they will attempt to flow into northern Syria and wipe the Kurds out. This advantages Syria because the Kurds have been fighting the Syrian government and the various terrorist organizations here in northern Syria. So for them to take the unbelievably bizarre approach to say, Mr. Assad, can you protect us against a NATO ally which allegedly was fighting terrorism, just seems to show how complex and how convoluted this part of the world is.
Yeah, it definitely does. And lastly, I just want to pull up some of the comments that were made by John Kelly as he is now leaving as chief of staff. And one of the things he was referencing was, of course, the president made this decision. It surprised a lot of people of wanting to pull the troops out of Syria. But Kelly goes on to say that essentially the president makes decisions in a way, he says, quote, "It's never been the president just wants to make a decision based on no knowledge and ignorance," Kelly says. he goes on to say, you may not like his decision, but at least he is actually fully informed of the impact. So that would imply, when it comes to Syria, he knows what the potential fallout is, and he's okay with it.
I'm not so sure about that. And certainly John Kelly has a better familiarity with what's going on in the White House. But in this particular case, the president is very transactional. To understand the fact that you have Lindsey Graham, as you played earlier, having a conversation with Dana Bash on State of the Union this morning saying, hey, I want to convince the president, after processes has shown intelligence, the rationale behind it, the effects on allies, and all the various degrees of difficulties involved with this very complex problem. For a senator that's outside the process of national security and is outside the intelligence process to say, I'm going to
rank it. One of the common things he would say, and it seemed like this was always out of context, and I'm not sure what context discussing antifreeze poisoning would be appropriate, but people would say, we were talking, and Dennis just came up with a statement. Did you know that 1 teaspoon of antifreeze taken every day for 10 days will kill you?
So investigators tried a different tack. They knew that Dennis Heller spent quite a bit of time in Oklahoma City, about 60 miles away. He had a girlfriend there for most of the time he was married. Her name was Karen Dawson, and she was more than willing to talk to police.
After Carol died, the girlfriend kind of put it all together and was very willing to work with us, to assist us in any way she could.
He had actually taken Carol's wedding rings down to Karen to have her try them on. This was prior to her death. Had Karen to try these things on to see how they fit because they would soon be hers, according to Dennis. Karen told police that Dennis was attracted to girls wearing cheerleaders' outfits, and he bought one in a second-hand store.
It's a lemon yellow 1960s cheerleading outfit with pleats that he gave to her that he had bought for Carol to wear at 53 years old.
Investigators convinced Karen to wear that cheerleader's outfit on the couple's next date, along with a hidden microphone. The two went to a drive-in restaurant. Undercover officers listened from a van across the street. Karen began by telling Dennis that if they were to have any kind of a life together, Dennis would have to be completely honest with her. Then Karen asked Dennis if he had anything to do with his wife's death.
I put it in her food.
Myself and Detective Farrell were listening on a receiving device.
She even described how he'd done it with an eyedropper, etc.
He had bragged to her that he was kind of proud that he had managed to do this and fool everyone.
That was a huge moment. That was a confession.
Surprisingly, when investigators arrested Dennis Heller, he wasn't at all concerned.
He did say to the investigators that it only takes one person on a jury with reasonable doubt. And slow poisoning is hard to prove.
Dennis Heller thought he had committed the perfect murder. He thought he had covered his tracks medically.
But there was one thing he hadn't counted on. Although there hadn't been an autopsy on Carol due to the Oklahoma City bombing, the medical examiner took some tissue samples for analysis. When tested, he found calcium oxalate crystals in her brain and kidney samples. Prolonged exposure to ethylene glycol can cause calcium oxalate crystals to form, causing renal failure and death.
They were getting clogged up. She probably got a pretty good dose 2 days before she died, from what we know.
He's a cold-hearted